Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Wake Up Tucson, 10:30 The Voice, local news and talk. As you know, a big thing that we've been advocating for, telling you about, is when people were saying defund the police a couple of years ago, I would say that the City Council of Tucson had the old classic hold my beer moment, because they've been defunding police for over a decade easy. And so I want to welcome to the show Tucson Police Department detective and member of AZ Cops, which is a statewide police union, and it's Detective Nate Foster. Nate, good morning, sir.
Hey, good morning. Thank you for having me on the show.
Well, thank you for being here. So how long has Nate been a TPD officer?
So I was hired in 2007. I've been on for a little over 15 years now, and I've seen a drastic change in the department.
Let's go back to young Nate when he decided, I want to be a police officer. Why did young Nate want to be a police officer 18 years ago or 19 years ago, or maybe even sooner, earlier than that, excuse me?
So I became interested in law enforcement. I was working at the Pima County Juvenile Detention Center.
Okay.
So I worked intake for a couple of years and just kind of got to know all the officers coming in, bringing in juveniles that were being detained at the courts.
Okay.
So they would all talk, speak very highly of the department. They all loved the job. They said it was exciting. They're always getting their step increases. They really spoke highly of it, made it sound like, one of the top agencies to work at in the area. So, of course, I wanted to become a police officer. That was the place where I applied.
And how was it when you first started? Were they lying to you, or were they exaggerating to you, or was it like that when you got there?
No, I don't. None of them were lying, but there was definitely a rug pull shortly after I was hired on. So, unfortunately, the step increases were cut. So I graduated the academy, made it through field training. I was working out on the East Side Division, and shortly after being in patrol, the step increases went away.
What year was that, roughly?
So that would have been 2008,
okay.
Early 2008, 2009, in that time frame.
All right. And again, the reason I say such things is we kind of started the show in 2009, if you guys remember, and that's when Regina Romero first got on the council. Just to let everybody know, because votes on budgets have consequences. Votes on budgets are the priorities in the end. No matter what they tell you, it's how they vote on budgets and how they basically divvy up the dough, the taxpayer dollars, to what they think's important. So when you take away step increases from police officers, it's a little bit of a problem.
Correct. And basically the step increases is kind of your compensation that rewards you and kind of values you for your time. So every year you get, I think it was averaged out to about a 5% pay increase that's stacked. I want to say there was 9 steps total around that time.
Okay. And, and then part of that is, right, so why would you do that, right? So one, it's an important job for a community. At the same time as the officer is building up experience.
Correct.
Right? And all that training that you've put into the officer, if they leave early, it's like wasted dough.
Yes.
For the government who's hiring these folks. So let's talk about just your career path from now, because right now you're a traffic detective.
Yes.
Right. So talk about I want to get a breadth of your career at TPD.
So like I said, I worked out East Side for probably about 10 years. I was in patrol. I did field training, and then I became a member of our community response team, the plainclothes unit out there.
So what is a community? What does that do specifically?
We were the proactive spear for the division. So if there was a problem, we were tasked to deal with it.
So that's arresting people that
we would go, follow up, arrest wanted subjects. We'd do a lot of surveillance, work narcotics, any street level issue that was occurring.
Right.
And I did that for 5 years. I eventually became the lead officer for that unit. And then over that period of time, the police chief changed, the demographics of the department were changing drastically. And I just kind of saw it as a time for me to pursue something different, which detective work assigned was something that was always a interest of mine. We worked closely with detectives in that unit because we're always doing follow-up on their cases. They had the people they wanted. We'd go find them for them, help them with search warrants, stuff like that. So it definitely was just kind of a natural progression to that next step.
When we were talking before we got on the air, you were talking about you joined the union, AZ Cops.
Yes.
For a reason, right? And
yes.
So what was the reason why because you didn't join, this, how long have you been part of AZ Cops?
So I've been a member, I'd say a little over a year and a half now.
Okay.
The reason I became a member was I was frustrated with the main union. Things have gotten pretty bad at the department, and I just felt like there was not a lot of action on their part. They would become vocal on certain issues, and then they would mysteriously quit. So,
well, when there was some sort of negotiation coming up on Doe, then all of a sudden they would do these amazing FOIA requests on response times and things like that. They'd get the council would throw some crumbs at you, and then they would shut up for 10 months.
Yes, and look at where we're at today.
Correct. So for you, when did you start seeing this decline? As you know, as a guy who's been doing this for 16, 17 years, when did you start seeing the whole TPD experience? I mean, we talked about step increases, but just the experience of being a police officer, when did you first start noticing that this was starting to be on a decline?
So the decline, I would say, really started shortly after I made it to the streets. It did start with the step increases, but it got progressively worse. So as those years started to grow, where we weren't getting pay raises, people became more and more frustrated, and then it became kind of a normal idea for people to kind of start looking to work for other agencies.
Sure.
So fast forward, and we get Chief Chris Magnus.
Yep.
Things got even progressively worse.
We're talking and catching up with Detective Nate Foster from Tucson Police Department and, of course, Arizona Cops. So you did a great radio tease for your first time on radio. You didn't even know it.
Oh, good.
You said things got progressively worse when Chris Magnus got hired.
Yes.
What happened under the Magnus regime? Because I've heard this from you're the 27th cop to tell me things got worse when Chris Magnus. But what's the details of how things got worse under Chris Magnus?
Well, so he was the least favored of the three candidates that applied to be chief. And, of course, mayor and council picked him against our wishes, which kind of leeways back to the lack of steps. It was just kind of felt like another,
a slap in the face.
Slap in the face, yes.
Right. And to me, I said when he got hired that he was a guy who was really supposed to be their advocate against you guys.
Yes.
Not actually be the police chief.
Yeah, and he portrayed himself as an advocate. He wasn't a cop's cop, and he came in and he was an outsider, and he turned everything upside down. He restructured the command staff and just kind of, I think, instilled fear in everyone within the department.
It's really interesting. He instilled fear, but at the same time, he was amazingly standoffish because people who worked downtown would tell me that he would park his car near a door that he can just take a direct staircase up to his office and not have to talk to anybody.
Correct. He didn't care about knowing any of us, and I'll kind of get into this further. Is my true belief is he was brought in as an axe man. They wanted the numbers cut down at the department. The city was in horrible financials. They were I think
pension was a train wreck.
Hundreds of millions of unfunded pension liability. And obviously, I'm not going to say that a police department is expensive, incredibly expensive.
Yep.
So I'm not taking that away from the city, but he came in to cut the numbers.
It's in their charter. That's what they're supposed to do, though, no matter how expensive it gets.
I agree, and it does feel like they're kind of kicking and screaming. They have the police department, and that relationship. It's always felt that way since I've been on the agency. Like we're the unnecessary evil, or the necessary evil, I should say.
So then George Floyd happens.
Yes.
Right. And so that gave him further license to have basically Magnus be the X-Men.
Yeah, they use that as a political opportunity to kind of jab us periodically. They put the Black Lives Matter painting on this. I think it was on the street, and then
it was the banner on the building
on the building, and I think they painted the street too.
Oh, they did. That's right. That's true.
And then obviously you had the gentleman in Tucson that wanted to put a thin blue line thing up, and they call him a racist or whatever.
Correct.
So
that was the mayor and various folks.
So as law enforcement, that hurts us. Like, I'm all for Black Americans furthering themselves, and I sympathize with what they're going through. But they were being used as a weapon against us. And I was on the streets. I also worked part of the rapid response team. That summer in 2020, I was called out weekly for protests. And we were going out every weekend, time away from our families to deal with these protesters. And they were mostly just rich, white, liberal kids that went to the U of A. Like, so it became frustrating. And then that really, like, you take our morale at the time, which was in the tank. I don't think it could have gotten any lower. You put that on top of it. And this is happening across the country. We're not the only police agency that this is happening to. People were just fed up. So you got tons of people are just like, I'm done. I'm going to go anywhere else, any other agency besides here, where I don't have to deal with this stuff every weekend. It's annoying. Tell
me about the police, the average police officer's reaction to Councilwoman Santa Cruz getting into that protest, and I don't know if she touched the guy or whatever she did. What was the response from the run of the mill average cop trying to do their job with her kind of that action during the protest?
So if you read the Arizona statute, she committed an aggravated assault. So if an officer has an implement like a baton, a firearm, a taser, and you try to take control of it or grab it, you've committed a felony.
Yep.
She committed a felony. It's on body-worn camera.
Correct.
And how can she be a council member after doing that?
Because she got cover from the rest of the council and the media in this town.
I agree, but
right.
At some point you got to wonder, if I was a constituent of hers, I'd be concerned because are you voting because you believe this, or are you voting because now you're potentially under threat of being arrested for something? Like I feel she's compromised.
Yep.
And obviously the way it was handled, just like everything else, it wasn't handled properly. She should have to recuse herself personally, I think, from every public safety issue that comes across
Amen.
For her to vote.
Amen.
Because she's compromised. I don't trust her to vote fairly and honestly.
Yeah, she obviously hates cops is my take, not yours. That's not Nate saying, that's Chris saying that. But
and I think a lot of people feel that way.
Tell me about naked, coked up guy, because that's the other issue, right? So this is the guy who is terrorizing his own grandmother.
Yes.
Right? No one else wanted him anywhere near them in the family, but grandma got stuck with him. And she calls up basically screaming on the phone that she fears for her life from her grandson. Kozaczek put it in his voluminous newsletters that this guy had a talk screen that was just off the wall with a variety of substances.
Yes.
Right? The 3 police officers try to contain this guy, right? And the guy dies as they're trying to contain this guy.
Yeah, it was an in-custody death. That was just another. They basically tried to make Tucson wanted to make it like George Floyd 2.0.
Correct.
So they wanted to have it as their own little version of events. That night it happened. It was investigated, and they moved on. It was a pretty standard thing that's not completely uncommon.
And this is Magnus, right? This is Magnus is the chief.
Yes, but obviously the political landscape changes with George Floyd, and they're like, oh, hey, now let's look back at this.
So all 3 officers, including one who's African American, was part of those 3 police officers,
yes.
Right?
Great officers.
They were exonerated.
That night, yeah. They basically come out, they investigate it, and go back to work.
Yeah, it wasn't even like we're going to put you on a desk job or suspend you for a couple of days. They put them right back in the same beat that they were at, correct?
Correct.
And then what happens?
The George Floyd thing happens, and now they put the spotlight back on it and try to parallel. I don't know what they were doing, but they threw those guys under the bus.
Correct.
And I can't say for 100% certainty, so I'm not going to state it as fact, but the rumor going around at that time was that those guys, when they got pulled back in for that, they were told it's in their best interest to resign by their union. And that was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. I was like, I'm done with this organization. We should not be doing this to our people. Like, when stuff like this happens, you need your unions to back you.
Right.
And they were just tossed aside.
Yeah, it feels like for the scraps that the council is going to throw them in dough, we're going to throw these 3 guys out as a sacrifice.
Yeah.
That's what it hit me as.
Yeah, and I think there was ways the department could have gone to back it. Like, when that incident happened, that was in the height of the COVID hysteria, right? So we were all being told daily that you're going to bring this virus home to your family. It's going to kill you. It's going to kill everyone you love, your grandma. Those guys are dealing with a naked guy huffing and puffing on drugs. So they're like, I really don't want to touch this person. I'm worried about getting sick. Let's put the blanket over him. Let's see if he calms down. Oh, I guess that wasn't the best decision. Obviously, I think it boiled down to a training issue. And obviously the department did do the right thing and try to educate everyone on it, because obviously we don't want this happening to anyone. It's a tragedy regardless. So
again, but it's another thing where in relation to morale,
yes,
right? It's that another, as Sting once saying, humiliating kick in the crotch, in Synchronicity 2, right? It's that another humiliating kick that basically you guys are a necessary evil that we have no respect for. And as you say, they kickingly and screamingly have a police department.
Yes.
It's crazy. All right. So when we come back, Nate and I are going to go through some of the staffing numbers, because I know that's something that you and the AZ Cops organization has gone through. And we're going to show you, what was that earlier date that we were looking at for from now till, what was it? Was it 2000?
2000.
Just 2000.
Yeah.
All right. So wait till we hear about the numbers and how they changed. And also, we used to have a lot of specialized units in CPD that have just been blown apart. Christopher D. Simone and Detective Nate Foster, Tucson Police Department, AZ Cops Police Union. So we were going, you guys have done some research on where the staffing numbers are.
Yes. Okay.
And of course, Tucson's population has grown a lot since 2001.
Yes. So we hear about the numbers, and even for us, it's kind of hard to, as employees, what are the numbers?
Correct.
It wasn't very transparent back in the day. I feel like the current Chief Kazmar, is doing a little bit better job of being more transparent on that, which we appreciate. So I had a roster from 2001 from our Midtown division, and then I compared it to our current roster, obviously 2022.
Yep.
Not 2023's current roster, but pretty close. So 2001 had 119 sergeants and officers in patrol in Midtown. 133 when you factor in like their bike squad and their community response team, also officers.
Right.
Fast forward to 2022, that number is now 68 total and 81 total when you factor in their community response team and other miscellaneous officer positions.
All right. So again, the 2001 number was what again?
19. So we'll just leave it just for patrol, because this is what's impacting everyone here in town is why, when they call 911, why do they not get an officer?
Correct.
Why does it take so long? This is why.
So 119 in 2001.
Yes.
And we're at what now?
68.
So we've had almost 50% drop in officers on patrol. Is that all right?
Yeah. So,
and I'm looking at the population of Tucson in 2000. It's about a 10 to 11% bump in population of Tucson. And plus, there's a bunch of people that we have no idea if they're actually, some of these fentanyl crazy people. We don't know if they're. I don't think they're in the population numbers.
Yeah, I don't think they're factored into the census.
I don't think they're answering their census questions.
Yeah.
So all right. So we've had a 50% drop in officers on patrol. Okay. Then you were telling me about some of these units, right? Because you were talking about you were part of the community response team.
Yes.
Right. And then there was, I assume we had we've all watched police shows and movies. I assume there was a vice squad.
Yes.
Right. What were some of these squads that maybe no longer exist?
So we did have a vice squad that was disbanded not too long after I came on. You had a surveillance unit, just a completely dedicated surveillance unit. We had a major theft offenders unit. I'm trying to think of all the other ones. The gangs.
Right.
So that's kind of funny too. They got rid of our gang unit, and then gang crime went bonkers. We had I was in the East Side. They got rid of the gang unit, and I think we had 20 gang-related shootings, and it was all over the place. So there a gang war literally kicked off in Tucson after they get rid of the gang unit.
Shocking.
Yeah, it was just and then
it's like something. This is out of a bad comedy movie, right? This is we got rid of our gang units, and gang violence went off the wall.
And then our community response team, we became a catch-all. And that was part of my frustration of being in that assignment. It became what what hat do I wear today? Am I going to be a surveillance guy? Am I going to be a gang guy? Are we going to go hunt? It just was constantly changing. And when you're doing that, you're doing a lot of stuff, but you're not doing anything well. So It just felt like we were out there just kind of throwing Band-Aids on, severed limbs. Like this will fix it for a second. But it became like whack-a-mole. You're just one to the other, and it became frustrating.
Well, the other thing is your job is to pursue like bad guys. Yeah. Right when you originally started the community, that's what you guys were supposed to be doing. Well, if you're doing surveillance and all these other things, then you're not doing the bad guy part.
Well, you're doing surveillance
as much
on bad guys and stuff and trying to arrest them, but it just you're getting pulled in a lot of directions. And honestly, like to our current patrol officers and those guys out there doing community response team, like I have tremendous respect for them. Like I can't believe they're doing the job in this current state.
It's overwhelming.
Yeah.
Overwhelming. So I've had a variety of chief people on this show over the years. We've heard them on other shows. We've heard council people on other shows. And one of the money questions really in the end is what is the actual amount of officers on patrol during any 1 week for reals? Right? Because they always want to tell me about the amount of sworn post-certified officers or blah, blah, blah. So I've heard 400, 500, or they just give me the 750 number of how many cops are actually on the street during a week in Tucson. Now, the number that people in reality, who are usually the cops on the street like yourself, tell me that it's somewhere between 200 and 300 cops.
Yes.
Where are we roughly at, do you think, effective cops on patrol in Tucson, Arizona?
Right around that number, I'd say probably around 250.
Okay.
So
this is a much lower number you hear from other folks out there because this is the reality. Don't get me wrong, when Chad comes on, he doesn't want to panic everyone and go, we're screwed. That's not his job. But the reality is we're down to 250 cops.
Yeah,
right?
it's the numbers are bad. You like you said, 50% reduction, and then you factored 10 to 15% growth. Add that onto the reduction in staff. Now we're at 60% understaffed, closely.
Right, and then tell me about the problem with having a totally blown open border right now in relation to being a cop in Tucson.
Well, those people are just getting dumped on the streets. So you drive around Tucson, you see people on the streets. They're everywhere. And that wasn't like that. That's over the last 3 years, it just exploded. It's crazy.
And then the drug problem on top of that.
Yeah, it's all related. There's the fentanyls in there. Everyone's using it, and fentanyl is now just the core of pretty much almost every problem we're seeing in law enforcement right now, especially within our community.
So you do traffic right now, and of course, there's so much traffic problems going on in Tucson right now. I think Chad, the last time he was on, he's trying to get it up to 15 patrol people. I think that's what he said, but he should have 45 to 50 at least.
Yes. So that was one of the brilliant Magnus ideas. I think it was a political play when he actually disbanded our motor unit. And I'm
laughing because I don't want to cry on the air.
It's insane. Like those guys provide a valuable, service to the community. They help keep drivers in check. When you're driving around, you're looking for one of those guys hiding under a tree.
Correct.
And it keeps your foot off the go pedal a little bit. When you did that, like you just pretty much said, hey, let's turn Tucson into Thunderdome overnight. And it's happened. Our fatalities, that's what I deal with. 88, 89, and now 2022, we closed with 99 traffic fatalities just in the city limits.
99?
Yeah.
Holy crap. That's horrendous.
Yeah.
We on our Facebook page, everyone sends it to us, or other people, What's Up Tucson, or other people cover it. We seem to be flipping 1 to 2 cars a week now in Tucson, Arizona. Why, Detective, is there so many flipped cars? Because I have my theory. I want to hear what are you seeing as the reality of why are there seems to be more flipped cars in accidents in Tucson than I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, and surprisingly, we're actually, as investigators, we're not going out to a whole lot of those. Thank God, modern cars have safety devices.
So you're only
built
going
in.
out if they die.
If they die, yeah. So we've had cars, where the people get ejected. And they're obviously, if that happens, they're not wearing a seatbelt. So most of these people that you're seeing these horrible wrecks are sort of walking away. And
wow,
that's just engineering right there.
So my take is that you have because Chris Magnus destroyed the motor unit, right? Is that there's no consequences really for bad driving. And if you're used to driving 50 and no one gets you in a 40, then you're going to go 60. You might even go a little if you're, then you got drunk, drugs. Oh, and you're watching Real Housewives on your phone at the same time.
Yeah, it's not uncommon for us to see 100-mile-an-hour collisions in the middle of the town. And that's just, it's insane. That's why you're seeing cars into buildings and stuff.
Right.
So it is scary out there. And what I will say is one of Chief Kazmar's first things he did after becoming chief is he brought the motor unit back. Obviously not in its full glory,
right? Because
we're understaffed. We can't rob Peter to pay Paul.
Sure.
But I'm glad he brought them back. It was ridiculous that was done.
So when people who try to defend the city council, to me, they always say, well, crime's going to happen, drugs are going to happen, blah, 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 right? There has to be a point in time where you make a stand, right? And then there's also, how do you prevent at least having more than your fair share of these horrible things? And we're having way more than our fair share of all of this because we've underfunded cops for a long time,
yes.
Right? I mean, isn't it just incremental misery over the last 20 years?
Yeah, this is the consequence of this push that's been happening in so many communities across the state. And now what that's doing is cops are like a commodity. If you think about it, supply and demand, the demand is high.
Yeah.
And you have all of these agencies that are desperate for cops, and the pay is just going up and up and up. So that's making the financial problems steeper for these cities. So
when you hear, the city of Phoenix went aggressive on their pay scale for cops.
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I don't know if some TPDers went that way. I'm sure they did.
We posted a video on our Tucson Police Protective League. That's the name of our union. We don't go by AZ cops because we're TPD specific, but phenomenal officer from TPD left. They did a whole YouTube video of him welcoming him, listing all of his training experience he's bringing over. They did this high quality production piece. Just they're happy, and they stole one of our officers. And that guy should be here in our community protecting it. We're less safe now. So I don't know if you heard him say this, because I usually don't recommend anyone listening to Steve Kazacha because it makes my ears bleed. But he actually crapped on the city of Phoenix for being stupid enough for raising that kind of. It's basically irresponsibly raising the pay scale for cops. Well, the reason he said that is it's in their labor contract with TPOA that they need to pay within 90% of Phoenix.
Ah, well, that's a nice little nugget I know.
There we go.
So that's why he was so outraged. They literally if the city, and luckily for the city, they don't really think the contract's a contract. They think it's a suggestion built on hopes and dreams and goodwill.
Correct.
Because they don't abide by it.
All
Never
right.
have.
Hold that thought. I want you to come back and tell us why some of the details on how they don't abide by it when we come back. We are catching up with Detective Nate Foster. This is only January 3rd. This is one of the most important interviews of this entire month coming up, and it's happening right now. Detective Nate Foster, TPD, and Tucson Police Protective League.
Yes, sir.
All right. Check them out on Facebook and other social media, I assume.
Just Facebook.
Just Facebook. They're old guys like me. Just
yeah.
Facebook. None of that Instagram crap. Now, tell me about when we went to break. You were saying that the city of Tucson the council believes that basically the contract is really something that's more of a suggestion based on hopes, dreams, fears, unicorns, rainbows.
Yes.
But they violate the contract. In which ways do they violate the contract?
Well,
or don't follow it?
Just kind of leading back to the initial part of the step increases. Right. That was the contract thing. And the city's just like, nope. And now the whole thing with our pay, they made that pay adjustment a couple of years ago, and that got us pretty close to where we should have been. And then Phoenix goes over the mountain with their pay scale. And then obviously Steve Kazachek, very upset about it. that's expensive. And now when I crunch the numbers, we would need to be, I think, at 94,000 topped out for an officer. Like, we have sergeants that don't make that. So I don't make that as a detective. So it's expensive.
That's life, right? That's my answer to Steve Kozachik. You guys are sitting on a $2 billion budget. That's life.
And also, when you think about it, so their neglect of pay for years on end, they've created these disparities amongst the staff. And now what you're doing, so they did another pay adjustment. So they raise the bottom up. They keep raising the bottom up, and then the top goes up as well. So if you're topped out, you keep moving up. And if you're at the bottom, you keep moving up. But if you're in the middle, where most of everyone sits, you're always in that middle.
Correct.
And that becomes really frustrating because you see people that have been on not too much longer than you, making way more. And then you see people that are new making not much less. So that adds to the frustration that people feel.
So let's talk about I want to talk about life on the streets as an officer. When you know that you could be on a shift, right? That basically for that division there might be 4 cops. That's not unheard of, right?
No.
Right? I mean, what's a ridiculous staffing amount you've seen for a shift out there?
That number is not unheard of that you just threw out.
4.
And the reason for that
and
is...
there's how many divisions in the city?
There's four full patrol divisions, and then you have the district, which is a small division within downtown.
Gotcha. So basically, somewhere between a fourth or a fifth of the city could be covered by 4 cops at one time.
Yes.
I mean, that's irresponsible. That's just irresponsible. So I want to talk about it in relation to the police officer. So when you're in a situation and you're basically skipping traffic accidents and things like that, you might go to because you got to go to more dangerous, important stuff.
Yes.
So when you're going against a possibly armed assailant who could be cracked out on meth or fentanyl, I've been learning that fentanyl's to get you up and meth is to get you down. Or it's the other way around.
Other way around.
Other way around, sorry. I didn't get my street drugs right. And there's 0 backup coming. How does it change the encounter for how you handle an encounter if no cop, there is no backup coming or it's not coming for a half hour?
It changes everything. When the staffing is like that, the sergeants are telling the officers, you're not doing anything proactive. Short of on-siting a murder, they don't want them out doing anything proactive when it makes sense because you get one good traffic stop and you pull over El Chapo with the gold AK and, a bunch of drugs and money, you're done. That shift's over and you're probably tying up another body, maybe 2. So that kind of stuff goes out the window. When I first came on, we had close to 1,200 officers. So what we would do every day is we would go clean up our division and our sectors. We all had sector assignments. And then after the board was cleared or very, very minimal calls sitting, we would go out and play and have fun. It was the greatest time ever.
So when you say play and go out and have fun, what does that mean?
Go. What are you interested in? Do you like to do traffic? Are you a DUI guy? I worked dope. I loved stopping cars and pulling dope off the streets. I was a dope cop. So I'd go and hit the bad areas and go arrest dopers. So
I'd hear Magnus say the word, we're doing community policing, which I knew was a lie because we hang out with Danny Sharp from Oro Valley, and Danny will tell you that to do real community policing, which is connecting with your business owners and your neighborhood folks or whatever, you have to be overstaffed a little bit to make that happen.
Yeah, you actually have to have police to police the community.
Correct, right?
Yeah.
So that's the other part of it is all those important connections could be those relationships to learn what's going on in your sector and or precinct. That hasn't happened for years.
No, and to say we do community policing, that's a disservice to the term and what it's meant to mean.
You are so correct again, sir.
I think our officers try to provide the best service they can, but there's a lot of things working against them right now, and I kind of want to touch on it.
All right, hold that thought. That's another great tease because we're going to run out of time. We're going to keep Nate over the hour. We're continuing our conversation, very important conversation, with Detective Nate Foster Tucson Police Department, and of course the Tucson Police Protective League on Facebook, part of the Arizona AZ Cops State Police Union. So thank you for being here. Now, there's a couple of things we need to get to. I might keep you 2 segments. You've been warned. Sorry.
It's okay.
It took a lot to do this interview, and I appreciate it.
I was a little nervous. I'm probably sure the listeners could tell early on, but I'm feeling a little better. Thank you.
Well, so the question is, we got to think, but I want to start off. Why are you here on, morning radio? This is one of the big things. There's lots of people who are involved in this situation that listen to this show, including people that work at the city and TPD. Why are you stepping up today to get this information out?
I'm tired of listening to the complaints. They're valid complaints. It's not the complaints that are the issue, but I don't feel like the explanations are there for these people that are suffering in our city. They're not getting the police service.
Correct.
And someone needs to tell the truth. And honestly, it's not just for the citizens. It's also for my fellow department members, because I don't think they feel like they have the voice that they need. And as part of me being the president for our organization is we're going to take a stand. We'll fight back against Chief. We'll fight back against the city. We're not going to back down, and we're not going to be fearful.
When I looked at when you go to the TPOA, which is and you look at their description of what they say they're the bargaining unit. That's what it says on their Facebook page. We're the bargaining unit. And you should be so much more than that. Just the bargaining unit.
Unfortunately, they are just the bargaining unit. And we are in the position we're in today because of that.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. We were talking about one of the things we wanted to get to. There's about 4 things now after we talked off air. Sorry. We got to get through it. Tell me about, because we've heard this from our discussions with the Tucson Crime Free Coalition. We've heard it from other officers about pretrial services.
Yes.
So what's happening so you arrest someone who did something bad and you take them, what happens there? Because we know there's that frustration that it seems like these people are back on the streets before the cop is.
Yeah, so pretrial's not applicable to DV or felony offenses. They'll go to the jail. But pretty much everything else follows under that umbrella. You also have people with warrants. They'll go through pretrial, like your misdemeanor warrants. And our typical street fentanyl users are stacking warrants. Like I've heard up to the tune of over 10 before they get booked into jail.
So you'll have some of these fentanyl folks, and you're saying they got 10 warrants. Because what's happening is each time they're going to pretrial,
yep,
and they're getting kicked.
They hit the turnstile and walk right back out the jail. They get on the free bus that the city provides, and they go right back to where they were arrested. Meanwhile, the officers still at the jail doing paperwork. They leave the jail. Now they have 10 warrant supplements to write in their car. I have a story to kind of tie this together.
Please.
It's mind-boggling. I've put my 3-year-olds on timeouts longer than pretrial services holds people. Like it's just ridiculous, and it's not sustainable. Like there needs to be a consequence. Then jail is our consequence. It's jail, or we end up using force on someone, and I'd rather take someone to jail than hurt them.
Right.
So there was an officer. This is when I was an aggravated assault. I'm not going to say anybody's names, but he arrested a guy, took him to pretrial services. He gets booted out. The next call he goes to the officer, it's the same subject, causing an issue, not leaving an El Rio. And the guy tells him he wants to go to jail. I want to just go to jail. And he's not eligible. The guy's just trespassing. The officer knows this. So he tells him, to get off the property. He's done dealing with him. He's sick of him. The guy attacks the officer, and a full-on fist fight ensues. The officer broke his hand. And this was an avoidable incident. Like these people that we take to jail, that's where they should go. Like we want them to go there. They need a timeout from society. Go dry out. You're using drugs. You're not going to quit using drugs on the streets. Go to the jail.
When you see some of the council folks or like Doogie Howser, Matt Hines on the Pima County Board of Soups, and they try to muddy the water and say, how dare you talk about these homeless fentanyl criminals, right? Because they're trying to muddy the water and equivocate them to the poor mom who's been outpriced out of her rental with her 2 kids. When you see that line of thought, what does that make a cop like you who's dealing with it every day?
We're not dealing with that. It's they're tugging at the heartstrings of people that don't know better and trying to get sympathy. It's a distraction, a bait and switch. We're not dealing with that. We're dealing with criminals hooked on drugs.
The other question. Let's talk about vax mandates, because we'll talk about another punch in the face to TPD officers.
Yes.
So that was something that the city council voted to fire people who didn't get the experimental vaccine.
Yeah. So that year, I'd say almost every city employee, besides fire and police, were working from home. They were considered non-essential. We didn't get the same respect. So every one of us were still out in the field doing our jobs. And we had a tremendous spike in violent crime that year. We set the record for homicides in 2021.
I remember.
And we dealt with the protesters, everything. We had suicides that year of our fellow officers. Our morale was the lowest it could be. People would kill themselves over how bad the situation has gotten. And I don't know. And I'm sure that's materialized personal issues for them. I can't speak for sure. I'm not them. I don't know what happened. But the city votes to fire us. And our staffing was already terrible. We're losing people at an alarming rate. And this was their solution. And it lacks any common sense. Like, why would you do that? And
they were so focused on that they keep on all of these things that they keep forgetting that the average Tucsonan that they say they're an advocate for, right? The woman who's getting beaten up by her boyfriend, the small business owner that has the fentanyl head with a knife running around, right? They seem to like that doesn't exist in their decision making, and it's just astounding. I've never seen 7 people do that like that. It's unfathomable.
No, and really, the city just needs to focus on public safety, putting that towards the forefront, and get rid of anything that's not involved in a core service at this point. They've created tons of positions within the city that I think are pointless, and it's a waste of money. And it's like, properly fund your core services so the businesses could be safe, so the citizens could be safe going to work. And then if you want to plant 1 million trees afterwards, if you have money in the bank and that's what you want to spend it on, go for it.
Well, they always hide behind their charter for justifying how they mismanage and how they do elections and things like that. But the charter says they're supposed to provide police protection, and that part they always ignore, it seems like.
Yeah, it's probably the most important part of their charter.
All right, when we come back, we're going to do one more segment with Detective Foster, and when we do that, we're going to do 2 things. One, he's going to tell you what percentage of the Tucson Police Department fleet cars is actually in the shop.
This is after the bond?
This is after the bond.
Or tax or whatever it was.
And then we're gonna do a little wrap up. I'm gonna have Nate wrap this sucker up in a tight ball and say that why this is important, and he needs people to join the cause for everybody. We're talking to Detective Nate Foster, Tucson Police Department, and Tucson Police Protective League. Nate, what percentage roughly of Tucson Police Department cars in the fleet are actually not really too operable right now? What would you say?
So in our unit specifically, we're a very high call out, generator. We go out all the time for traffic accident fatalities. We have, I think, 4 newer vehicles purchased within the last 2 or 3 years.
Yep.
And then everything else is old. Like, I think we have a ride seized from a pimp right now that we're moonlighting as a truck. And believe it or not.
So hold on. This is I never thought I'd hear ride seized from a pimp on the show today. But is there a police officer driving around doing his work in the ride seized from the pimp?
Well, not anymore, because it's at the shops getting fixed.
Oh,
again.
No.
Even that
Oh, no.
Sad to say, but so I think we have 4 vehicles out right now.
You guys Ubering or what?
Well, no, I have basically like an airport shuttle that I drive. It's a giant white van. If I stop in front of a school because I break down, the police get called, but luckily they probably won't show up.
So they have you in a white shuttle van driving around doing your detective work?
Yeah, Honestly, I don't hate it. It's, considering how the vehicle situation, I'm going to be a glass is half full.
So do we
Could
think
be worse.
50% of the fleet might be basically crap right now?
I don't know. For the patrol guys, they got newer vehicles, and I'm glad they do. They need it.
Sure.
But we still, like, DPS just did, like, an honorary, like, decommissioning of the last Crown Vic. And I commented, hey, if you guys really like Crown Vics, come to TPD. We still have a bunch of them to drive.
The classic Crown Vic car show.
I was on a call out not too long ago, and this CSO was driving a Crown Vic, and I was worried about getting carbon monoxide poisoning. I turned the car off, and I was like, this is outrageous. Like, this isn't healthy for you, man. You can't be driving this.
We're supposed to be so green.
Yeah.
Tell me, you mentioned the free bus service. Tell us how the city council's continued free bus service has been a actual bane to this community and not a bonus.
Well, normal people don't want to ride the bus.
Correct.
Right? So you are now disenfranchising a lower income demographic within your community, because now you're taking away or making it unbearable to use the bus to get to work or services you need. And now you just it's a freak show. You got criminals riding the bus. And then you have the bus drivers who now fear for their safety. I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet. I don't know what the Teamsters do for the Suntram bus people.
I have a buddy who drives for them. She says it's the worst she's ever seen in her life.
I'm surprised they haven't went on strike again. Because they can do it. And they
have a better bargaining unit than you guys.
Well, we're not allowed to by law. And honestly, if we went on strike, that's not the right thing to do, because ultimately, while I'm at home, protesting against the city, some good person is going to get hurt, and that's not right.
I totally agree. So in the end, so when you look at people coming, I've seen Matt Hines attack the Tucson Crime Free Coalition.
Yes.
When you see people attacking the Crime Free Coalition, because we know that the mayor is very antagonistic towards and also the county attorney now we're finding out is antagonistic. When you hear about leaders in this community being antagonistic towards the Tucson Crime Free Coalition, what goes through Nate Foster's head?
These people that are in these positions have a fear of accountability to the people they're supposed to be representing. And now that this voice is growing and getting traction, it scares them. I think they feel vulnerable deep down. Do I have faith that these people will be voted out? I don't. I'd be surprised with how the city runs their elections.
Right.
But I do think they feel vulnerable, and the intention, the effects happening. These people feel the pressure. And honestly, I love this coalition. I think this is the greatest thing to happen to our community.
I've never seen anything like it.
And I hope it continues to grow. I really hope any listeners that don't follow them, please do. That we have 100% support with them. And they're fighting for things. They want us to be able to be more effective with our jobs. So they're addressing pretrial services. They want us to be staffed. They want us to be properly equipped. And so we can do our jobs.
Right. I mean, again, when you put people, so any business, any kind of organization, right? If you don't give your employees, right, the tools to succeed, right? Whether that's the equipment, but also the proper staffing, that's considered a huge no-no in any organizational system. But when you're doing it in policing, right? And what you're doing is you're basically putting the lives of your employees, the officers, and the people they serve at even a greater risk. It should be unacceptable. But for sad point, there's a part of this community that still thinks that's acceptable, or they're ignorant.
And that's, I think, where we come in. The public needs to be educated. Quick side note is we found out there's a liberal professor at the U of A, and our name was being circulated in an email that wasn't supposed to get to us. So we asked some questions, found out who he was. I invited him to the meeting, and the guy's got BLM stuff, anti-police stuff on his Facebook, and we said, hey, let's take you on some ride-alongs. And his worldview completely changed. And at the end of the day, we turned an enemy into an ally.
Yeah.
And it's just about education. These people need to know and see it for yourselves. If you think the police are terrible, you don't support them, come do a ride along. Have an open mind. Don't be disrespectful. Those guys are out there risking their lives. But come out with an open mind, and I bet your opinions will change.
So we did a whole 3 hours of Tucson Crime Free Coalition stories last month.
Yeah, I listened, and it was some of it's funny just because it's just so ridiculous. But at the end of the day, it's tragic. It's really sad. I was sad to hear all that.
You know, Matt made it into a great 17-minute compilation, and I wish a good portion of Tucson would listen to that, because it would change the whole. I wish the other media in this town would cover it, because the Arizona Daily Star doesn't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole. So,
No.
Have you guys ever submitted a op-ed to them at the Arizona Daily Star? Might be an idea.
No, yeah, it wouldn't be a bad idea. I did submit our no confidence letter to, I think, Tim Steller.
He's useless.
Yeah, it didn't get any traction.
I would do a guest opinion and see if Kurt Pendergrass shoots you down. That's what I would do.
Kurt? Okay.
Yep.
I'll write that down.
Go from there. We got about 2 minutes.
Okay.
So how would Detective Foster like to wrap this conversation up today?
Well, I do feel like I shed a lot of negativity over the last hour or so, but at the end of the day, we need people, and this is a fun job. I love everyone I work with, and we have a good time. Come be part of the team. We need to grow our numbers, and at the end of the day, in the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to be a whole new police agency. So you can literally come in as a new officer and help build something new and be a part of it.
But we do need to change out some council seats, don't we?
That's where we come in. We need to keep the pressure on these people, and hopefully the voters start making wise decisions.
There's 4 seats coming up in November, including the mayor. And if you can change some of those seats, you can actually change, even without changing the other 3 seats, you can change the dynamics of the council, and maybe they'll start making some decent decisions.
I agree, 100%.
All right. Nate, thanks for being here. I know it took a lot to do this, and I'm sure you have family members that are nervous you even did this. So, but God bless you for what you guys do and coming for doing this with us today.
Thank you, and I appreciate you sharing your platform and letting us kind of get the word out. We really appreciate it.
Anytime. All right. Just ask. Detective Nate Foster, Tucson Police Department. Remember to join Tucson Crime Free, TucsonCrimeFree.com. Wake up, Tucson, 10:30 The Voice, local news and talk.